Welcome back to the Classical Homeopathy channel. This is Bill Gray. I'm a practicing homeopath for 49 years, and I'm trying to explain more about what classical homeopathy is all about. Today we're going to talk about the science behind homeopathy. This is a very important topic these days because there's a lot of controversy about whether homeopathy is scientific or not, despite the fact that there are hundreds of research papers published over the last 70 years. I myself wrote a book called The Homeopathy, Science or Myth, that's available on Amazon, by the way, that summarizes the research up until around 2000. There's also a wonderful resource with Dana Ullman at his website. He keeps up to date the current scientific research, and you can find him at homeopathic.com, and he has a number of different articles over the last several years that are very valuable in keeping up to date on the research that does exist. One of the most impressive studies that got my attention early on when I was writing my book is if you do a simple experiment, and this anyone can do, if you take a slide or just a piece of glass and put ordinary salt water on it, and then put it in an electromagnetic field, you will get a certain pattern of collection of the water. It looks about like this. Clumpy, kind of boring. But if you take homeopathically prepared salt water, exactly everything the same except prepared in the homeopathic way, you get and put it in an electromagnetic field, you get a very different view. It looks like this. It shows that there's something dramatic in the water or in association with the water that makes it susceptible to electromagnetic fields. That was early on in the research. The difficulties with homeopathic research has to do with the fact that, as I explained in other sessions, homeopathy is a highly individualized practice. If you take 10 arthritic patients or 10 colitis patients, instead of getting one remedy for the ailment that you give to everybody, each person would get a different remedy based on who they are as a unique individual. That makes it difficult to do the classical studies where you have a control group and a treatment group, because the treatment group is getting different remedies. Each individual is getting different remedies. There are mathematical ways around this, and the research has been done at university levels in both, especially in Europe, but also in the United States, that get around this difficulty using mathematical comparisons. And there's plenty of research that published that proves what the value of homeopathy is in these circumstances. Part of the confusion about what's scientific and what's not depends on your philosophy of science. Doesn't have to be only one philosophy, but there's two fundamental orientations towards science: the deductive method and the empirical method, or the reductionist method and the empirical method. The deductive method starts from the idea that you have a theory and you want to prove the theory, so you define the parameters and you set up your research project in such a way as to be able to carefully define those parameters to either prove or disprove your hypothesis. And then this is replicated and done over many different centers to the point where you are convinced that it's a reliable hypothesis. That's the deductive method, and that's the predominant one these days. Another valid approach that's been so since the beginning of science is the empirical method, which basically looks at the universe kind of with open eyes and looks at phenomena in the universe and tries to explain what is seen. The truth then is derived out of what actually is happening, like say especially in nature, and then the hypotheses come out of that observation. It's very different than us thinking in our heads and defining a hypothesis and then testing the universe. Homeopathy from the beginning has always been an empirical science, meaning that certain observations are made that show that these remedies, this certain substance, if given to a person with certain sets of symptoms, will then cure those symptoms. That's an empirical observation. We don't know why. It doesn't fit, it isn't validating or invalidating a hypothesis. It's just an observation. And then another substance and another substance, and now we have 7,000 substances. So each of those are data points that, that taken together comprise the homeopathic science. So because it's empirical, the actual mechanism has not been answerable by homeopaths. When asked, well, if it does work, then how does it work? We didn't have an answer for a very long time. We just know it does work empirically, and we can validate that with all kinds of sophisticated research. But how it works, we did not have an answer until about 2 decades ago. At that point, various research, especially partly in the United States, but especially in India, began to elucidate the exact physics of how the homeopathic remedies can work. The biggest complaint from scientific people is, well, how could it work if there's nothing in it? As I explained in another session, the way the remedies are prepared is by a process of taking a substance, putting it in solution, and then having a robotic machine actually pound it, dilute it, and then pound that and dilute that, and pound that and dilute that, and keep going until there's literally no molecule left of the original thing. For the scientists in the audience, it's past Avogadro's number, often by quite a bit. So if there's nothing in it, the argument goes, how could it possibly work? It must be a hoax, or it must be placebo effect, even though we treat babies and animals and sometimes even plants, which aren't susceptible to placebo effect. So how could this work? What the research now shows in the preparation of the remedies is that the simple description is when something's in solution, a molecule is in solution, that molecule is surrounded by water molecules in a shell. And when you pound it, that shell breaks into pieces. When you dilute it, it expands their size. So the more you pound it and dilute it, the more you get these nano clusters in the water that carry the same energy as the original thing, even though we've gotten rid of the original thing, past Avogadro's number. The whole principle then is the nano clusters carry the energy of that substance, and that's the active process that works through resonance to stimulate the body to heal itself. These nanoclusters have been observed by electron microscopy, atomic force microscopy, various methods of spectroscopy, and that shows that these clusters actually exist and actually are related to the effectiveness of the remedy, if it's properly prescribed, of course, which is for another session. So if you want to know more about the science, please go to Dana Ullman's website, homeopathic.com, and or get my books, Homeopathy, Science or Myth, and study some more. There's enough science out there to actually put you to sleep. So this is Bill Gray saying bye for this session, and I look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you for listening.